How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chavav, Daf 26 of Masechta Sanhedrin. Friends, your friends. Today we kind of talk about some stuff. I think some of it's even interesting. Alright, we're going to start on Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, 4 lines into the Amud. Daf Chavav Amud Aleph, 4 lines into Amud. So the Mishnah had said something kind of cryptic, like initially they would call them gatherers of Shvius, but then they called them merchants of Shvius. What's this talking about? So my Kamar, what in the world is this talking about? Amar view, this is a view. Achi Kamar, this is what it's talking about. This is what in the world it's talking about. And initially they would say that people who gather produce on Shvius, so basically on Shemitah, produce is hefker, right? You have to leave it for, anybody to be able to take it. Now the thing is, so long as there's still more for people available for people to take out in the field, so then you can take stuff into your house as long as there's still other stuff available. Once there's nothing left available, so you can't be hoarding produce in your house. You have to make it hefker. So now, so initially they would say people gathering produce during Shemitah is acceptable, right? As long as it's only so long as there's still more available, you can gather more for yourself. But if you're doing business, right, sochar shvis, if you're doing business with produce of Shemitah, well then that's a problem. You can be puzzled. So now again, batchila initially they would say osvei shvis kshein. If you're gathering together produce, if you're gathering produce on Shemitah, so long as there's still more available on the fields for other people to take, kshein, there ain't no problem with that. Socharim psulin, but if you're doing business with produce of Shemitah, then you're puzzled, and that's a problem. But however, Misharabu mamtsiei ma'is la'aniyim va'azle aniyim va'asvelu umaisu. However, what was happening was people would then hire aniyim, poor people, to gather lots of produce for them on their behalf, and then that was a problem because then already it's like they're doing business with the Shvius. So then Chazul Omar echad zeh v'echad zeh psul, and they said, you know what, both scenarios are possible. Whether you're gathering large quantities, whether you are actually doing business with it, it's possible. Kashuba b'nei Rachba, but the b'nei Rachba had a question. I misharabu ha'nosim misharabu ha'tagarin mi'boile. But the Mishnah says that initially what does the Mishnah say? That Batchila yukarin osin osvei shvius. Initially they will come gatherers of shvius, but misharabu ha'nosim, when like the problematic people, forcing people came, the problematic people came, then they started calling them sochar shvius, merchants of shvius. But asks Rochbe, b'nei Rochbe, they asked, what you say is that once the merchants increased, once people started kind of hiring people to gather produce for them, then all of a sudden it became problematic to gather produce of Shemitah. So it shouldn't say Mishrabu ha'anosim, it should say Mishrabu ha'tagarin. So Batchila Yomi, rather, initially what they would say is echod zeh v'echod zeh psulin, that both gathering large quantities and doing business with produce of Shvius are problematic, and you'd be possible if you do that. Misharabu ha'anosin umayninu arnona. But when this kind of problematic situation evolved, and what's that? Basically, the problematic situation is that there was arnona. There was a produce tax that every single year you had to give a certain amount of produce to the king. Now the thing is, the king doesn't care that it's Shemitah. So now what are you supposed to do? Because you have this kind of quota, you have this tax that you need to pay, but you're not actually growing anything. So Zubyanai announced Poku v'ziru b'shvius. Go and plant on Shemitah mishum anono, just that you can pay the tax. So then they went back to say, okay, gathering for the tax betzim is kosher, you'd be kosher leidus, but if you're doing business, so then you'd be possible. Reb Chia bar Zarnuki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok havukazli la'ab b'shana ba'ases. So Reb Chia bar Zarnuki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok were going to leap a year, and they were going to Asya to do this. Pagabu Rish Lakish bumped into them, Itbil Badayu, and he joined together with them. Omar, he figured, Ezil Echze Heichi Abde Uvda. Let me go and be a fly on the wall, and I'll see what they do. I'll see how they leap years. So Chazila Ugav the Kokarib. Now on the way, they saw a person who was plowing his field during Shemitah. Plowing a field during Shemitah. So Rish Lakish says to them, Koyin v'chorish. What's going on? You have a Koyin, and the Gemara is going to explain in a few minutes why we assume it's a Koyin. You have a Koyin, and he is, right, and it's because the assumption is that Koyanim are more lax with Shemitah. Well, we'll get there soon. And he's plowing his field. Omrulo. So, why are you assuming that he's doing something wrong? He could say, look, I'm just working the field of a non-Jew. So maybe he's not actually doing anything wrong. I'm just working a non-Jew's field. Okay, there was another incident. They saw a person that he was pruning a vineyard during Shemitah. And then Rish Lakish says to them, Koyin v'zam. Here's a Koyin who's pruning his vineyard during Shemitah. They said to him, he could say, look, I'm just pruning these branches because I need to make some kind of a net for the olive press. Right? It was for some permitted motive, reason. To which Rish Lakish says, yeah. The heart knows what his intention is. The heart is right. His heart knows if he's pruning these vines for to make a net, or if he's doing it because he's doing something problematic. Hey, Amar Liberation. Now, which of these two incidents happened first? The plowing incident, where they suggested that maybe he is an employee on a non-Jew's field, or the incident with the net, where he says, right, maybe he's making a net out of it. So if you're going to tell me that the plowing scenario was first, where they said maybe he's working a non-Jew's field, well then, well then, why wouldn't you then just make the same argument when it comes to the pruning the vineyard as well? It's just like by the plowing, you could say that you're plowing somebody else's field. So say the same thing by the vineyard, that you're vineyarding somebody else's vineyard, a non-Jew's vineyard. So Ella ha'omar le'beresha v'hadar omar le'ach. Rather, it must be that the vineyard scenario was first, and they suggested, well, maybe in this particular case, he's like making some kind of a net for an olive press. And then came the second case, right? And then came the case of the plowing, where the suggestion was that maybe he's actually an employee on a non-Jew's field. Alright, fine. Mashna Kohen, okay, now getting back to the question of why was Rish Lakish assuming that this was a Kohen who was working the field, as we're going to see, because Kehanim were generally suspected of being more lax when it comes to Kedusha Shvius, because after all, you have Truma that nobody's allowed to eat, and they're allowed to eat. You have Kodshim that nobody else is allowed to eat, and they're allowed to eat, so maybe they think that Kedusha Shvius also doesn't apply to them. Right, so again, so Ma'ashna Kohen, the answer is Mishum Dechshide ala Shvius, because they are suspected when it comes to their guarding of Shvius, their practice towards of Shvius. The Tan is learning the Brisa Sa'a Truma Shenafel Mea Sa'in Shel Shvius. One Sa'a of Truma that falls into 100 Sa'as of Shemitah. Now, generally, right, there's a concept of Meduma, that if Truma falls into Chulin, so then the whole thing is considered a mixture of Truma. You have to treat it like Truma, but if there's 100 parts of Chulin to one part of Truma, so then the Truma becomes Batal. So here you have one part of Truma to 100 parts of Shemitah. So the Truma is Batal, and we Be'etzim treat it like Shemitah. So then it Be'etzim becomes Batal to the Shemitah, and we just treat the whole thing like Shemitah. Pachis Mikhaim, but if it's less than 100 parts of Shemitah produce, Yirkivu, you just have to let the whole thing rot. let the gantz thing rot, because you have to treat the whole thing like truma, because there's less than 100 parts of Shemitah produce to the truma. We ask them, wait, why do they have to rot? Why don't you just sell, right? You have this mixture of 1 part truma to, I don't know, let's say 99 parts of Shemitah. So it's not enough for the truma to be bottled. It's not enough for the truma to be bottled. Okay, so just treat the whole thing, like, okay, so you have to treat it like truma. So sell the whole thing to a kohen, because a kohen is allowed to eat truma. So just sell the whole thing to a kohen, and just except for the 1 part of truma, because you can't make money off of that. But the rest sell to a kohen. Why are we saying that the whole thing needs to rot? From Rav Chia Mishmei Deula, says it says this indicates that nechshedu kayanim ashvius, that priests are suspected when it comes to enforcing right their practice of shvius. Amru, okay, so fine. Okay, with that kayanim are suspected when it comes to shvius, and that's why Rish Lakish was suggesting that this person plowing the field or pruning the vineyard was a kohen, because kayanim are generally more lax when it comes to Shemitah. Amru trudu udein. Now Rish Lakish was, kept on suspecting people of violating Shemitah. So Reb Chia bar Zanoki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok said, "Wow, Rish Lakish is a real piece of work." When they came to Asya, when they came to the place where they were going to be to leap the year, Sliku Ligo, they went up to the roof, Shalfu l'dargim mitusa, and then they quickly pulled out the ladder so that Rish Lakish could not come up to the attic where they were. They had enough. So now Rish Lakish goes to Rabbi Yechanan. Omer Lein, Rish Lakish says to Rabbi Yechanan, Bnei Adam achshudin al hashvius, these people, Reb Chia bar Zanoki, and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok, who I suspect their perspective towards their performing the mitzvahs of shvius. Oh my gosh, I'm like, can't think of the word that I'm like want to think of. But anyways, Rish Lakish says, look, Reb Chia bar Zanoki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok seem to be like coming in support of the people who seem to be violating Shemitah. People who are lax with regard to Shemitah. Would we trust them to leap a year? Hadar Amar, Rish Lakish then said, Lo kashali midi, actually it's not a problem. Lo kashali, it's not a problem. Midi da'ava shlosh roi bakar. V'abar nachush b'nayu samuch. Well, for example, we had, I think it was on Daf Yud Ches, those roi bakar, those cattle shepherd people who would make distinctions about the month of Adar based on, for example, if an ox in the morning is freezing but then is hot in the afternoon, so then it must be Adar. And the rabbis, made decisions, and sort of took into account those observations of the Roi Bakar. So here also, yeah, sure, maybe they're lax when it comes to Shemitah, but we could still if we could trust the Roi Bakar, we could trust them as well, right? They could be taken into account. But then Rish Lakish says, Lo dami, actually the Shlosh Roi Bakar are not similar to Reb Chia bar Zanuki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok, who are lax when it comes to Shemitah. Because over there by the Shlosh Roi Bakar, at the end of the day, the rabbis then went independently and leaped the year. And sure, maybe they took into account what the Shlosh Roi Bakar said, but ultimately it was their own independent research that and sort of decision making that determined that it would be a leap year. But over here, these people are Rishayim, Reb Chia bar Zanoki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok, that they're lax when it comes to Ilchos Shemitah. V'kesher Rishayim enu min haminyan, and you can't have a group of Rishayim be included in the number that you need, the quorum that you need to leap a year. Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabbi Yechanan, upon hearing Rish Lakish's sort of accusations towards Reb Chia bar Zanoki and Reb Shimon ben Yotzadok, Rabbi Yochanan says, this is unfortunate. When they came before Rabbi Yechanan, They said to him, Karilan Roye Bakr, did you see? Rish Lakish called us cattle herdsmen. That's not very nice. Rabbi Yochanan, you didn't say anything to Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says to him, and what if he would call you sheep, shepherds? What would I tell him? Okay, call you Roye Bakr. I don't know what you want me to tell you. What should I have said in response? Okay. My Kesher Rishayim, fact the Gemara, what is this group of evil people? Shevno Avadarish Betleser Abavasa Chizkiah Avadarish Bechatzri Abavasa. So for example, during the time of Chizkiyahu Melech, when Sanhedrin was placing a siege on Jerusalem, so there were two schools of thought. There was Chizkiah, Melech Yehuda, who said that we should believe in Hashem and we'll be all good. And then there was Shevna, who said we should surrender to the Assyrians. So you have Shevna Avadarish Betleser Abavasa. Now Shevna had a bigger oilam than Chizkiah. Shevna would dash into 13,000 Tleser Rabavasa, 10,000 times 13. That's 130,000 students. Chizkiah Avadarish Bechadzar Rabavasa, to 110,000 students less than Shevna. Because Sanhedrin Tzar Allah Yerushalayim, when Sanhedrin came in and besieged Jerusalem, laid a siege on Jerusalem, because of Shevna Piska, Shevna wrote a petek, he wrote a little note, Shad Begira, and he shot it with an arrow to Sanhedrin. Where am I? Shevna V'Siyasu Ishlimu, and Shevna wrote in the note that he shot over to Sanhedrin with an arrow. He says, look, I, Shevna, am interested in making shalom, and interested in making peace. Chizkiah V'Siyasu Lo Ishlimu, but Chizkiah and his people are not interested in making peace. Shneimar Zapazas Kinei Rishoyim Yidruchun Keshes Kodnu Chitzim Al Yoser, that the Shmendriks, they have these bows and arrows, and they make trouble. Havakam Mistafei Chizkiah, and now Chizkiah was getting nervous. He was getting shpilkis. Omer, he said, Dilma Chaz V'Shalim, not Yodaite Dekuchibichu Basruba, maybe the Eibishter is going to go after the majority. And Shevna has the larger majority, 130,000 versus my 110,000. And since the majority, Shevna's majority, is going to be surrendering to Sanhedrin, and Hashem is going to be giving them to Sanhedrin, maybe we're also going to end up falling to Sanhedrin. But Navi v'Amar and Lo, so the prophet came and said to Chizkiah, Lo Tomu, don't say Kesher lakol asher Yomar Amazeh Kesher Klomar Kesher Shaimu, that Shevna is a group of Shmendriks, v'Kesher Sham Eino Min Aminyan, and a group of Shmendriks does not count. Halach Latzov Lo Kever B'Kiver Beis David. Shevna then went to make a catacomb for himself, I guess to ultimately be buried together with the other kings of the house of David. But Navi V'Amilo, the prophet came to Shevna and says to Shevna, Ma'lecha fo umilecha fo ki chotzavtu lecha po kever. What are you doing here? Why are you making for yourself a catacomb over here? Hine Hashem taltelcha taltole gover. Hashem's going to wander you around the wandering of a man. Rav says, Rav, Tula de Gavra Koshemi de Itzla. The wandering around of a man is more difficult than is harder than the wandering around of a woman. I forget how it says. Ve'otcha otoy. Amr Yossi b'Bchanin Malamcha Parcha bo Tsaras. So it means that Shevna got Tsaras, leprosy. Ksivach says ve'otcha oto. It says by Tsaras that Asofim Yaitis. So we see that Shevna got Tsaras. Son of I keep on forgetting how to read it. Son of Yitznefa Kadrel Eretz Rachvas Yodaim. Vigomer. Tanu Bikesh Kolon Beis Adonov V'chich Nepach Kvodu LeKolon. Well, he wanted to embarrass Chizkiah, so he ended up getting embarrassed. Ki Avanofik Iu. Now, when Shevna ultimately was leaving Yerushalayim to go and surrender to Sanhedrin, also Gabriel came the angel Gabriel. Achde Lidosha Baipe Mashar Yose. He went and slammed the gate shut before Shevna's posse. So Betzim Shevna left the gates of Yerushalayim, and then all of the rest of his group got stuck in there. So he ended up showing up to Sanhedrin with just him alone. Amulei. So they say to Shevna, "Why are you here by yourself? Masher Yosach Heicha. Where did your whole group of 130,000 people go?" Omar. So Shevna says, "Adru bi, they turned against me." Amulei, Sancheriv's people then said to Shevna, "Imkain, if that's the case, you're making fun, you're mocking us." So they pierced his heels, and they hanged him by the tails of their horses. They were schlepping him on the streets. They tied him to their horses. Then they were dragging him on the street on the thorns and the other unpleasant things that are on the street. Very very modna dikazach. It's like they do not too far away from where I live. They do things like that for different people that they don't like. But now they might use horses, but I think they also use motorcycles now. They'll push it. I think take a guy and tie him to a motorcycle and ride around with the guy dragging on the floor. I don't know if it's before they execute him or maybe he just kind of dies along the way. Unclear, but it seems very very nasty thing to do. Okay. Omer Belazar says Belazar Shevna balanoya hoya. Shevna enjoyed pleasure. And it says here sochen. So and just like the sochenes by David, King David was to pleasure him. So here also it's talking about pleasure. What's the base over here? Okay, fine. Ki ashosos yaresun tzadik mapoal. Rav Yudav Rav Einachad Omer Ilu Chizkiah v'Yosef Nerosim. If Chizkiah and his people are going to be destroyed, Tzadik Mapal, then how's that going to look for Hashem? V'chad Omer, one of them says Ilu Beis Hamikdash Yaris. If the Beis Hamikdash, the holy temple, is going to be destroyed, Tzadik Mapal, how does that look for God? Vula Omer says Vula Ilu Machshavos of Shalisei Rosh in Nerosos. If Shevna's thoughts are not destroyed, Tzadik Mapal, then what's going to be? What's everyone going to think of Chizkiah? Okay, so I understand if we're saying that it's talking about the thoughts of Shevna, that's why it says Hashasos. Hashasos is thoughts. Yerasu. What? Where am I? Ki Hashasos Yehoresun. Azoy. For the Madam Beis Hamikdash Nami. Also, according to Madam says Beis Hamikdash is not Evan Oisa Sham. That there was a stone in the first temple from the early prophets. V'shesiya Oisa Nikres. It's called the Evan HaShesiya. So we see Shasos could be referring to the holy temple. But if you say it's talking about Chizkiah, where do we see that tzaddikim are called Shasos? Says that to God are the foundations of the land by Yoshes Aleim Tevel. So we see Shasos in the context of foundations, and we know Tzaddik Yisod Olam. Lots of advice and tushia. Okay, and I guess that's referring to tzaddikim. It's referring to Torah, and tzaddikim study the Torah. Why is Torah called Tushia? Because it weakens a person. When I guess they get really into learning it. I'm pretty tired right now myself. Alternatively, because the Torah was given in quietly out of concern of the Satan. And the Satan shouldn't know about it. It's these words of Tohu, I guess all these just like words of Torah what is Rasha's Dibur Kriya Ba'alma Chodibur Einbo Geshisha Mamish Kito Azeh, meaning so these words which I guess aren't physical, and even so the world I guess is dependent on them. Okay, thoughts out of concern of like parnosa, and how you're going to make a parnosa, they can distract you from learning Torah. Shneimar says, "Meifer machshavos arum v'lo sa'asenu yedeim tushia." That be'etzem these thoughts about Tiddus Panosa can interfere with your ability to study the Holy Torah. Amar Rabbi says, Rabbi Masuk in the Shema. However, if you're studying the Holy Torah, the Shema, for its sake, for the sake of learning Torah, Eina Mo'eles, well then these thoughts are not going to distract you. Shneimar says, Rabbos machshavos belevish, that a person has lots of thoughts in his heart, but the advice of God is what stands. Any advice that has in it the word of God will stand forever. And I guess therefore, if you're studying Torah Lishma, then you'll be in good shape. Amar B'Yudai Masai, Amar Babao, Amar Belazi, Alacha Kab'Yudah. So B'Yudai had said that when it comes to gambling, it's only a problem if that's their primary source of income, because they're not asukim b'yeshuva shalom. But if they have a primary source of income, so then it's okay if they gamble on the side. Because after all, they are asukim b'yeshuva shalom with their primary form of employment. And says Rabbi Baba, the name of Rabbi Lazar, that the halacha is taka like Rabbi Yehuda. All of these scenarios in the Mishnah, you have to announce about them, right? So and so is posel edus because he lends with ribbis, for example. Roya, however, when it comes to a shepherd, pligi ba Ravacha Ravina's machlokes Ravina chanomer baya achraz v'chanomer lo baya achraz. One opinion is that they have to announce about a shepherd. The other opinion is that they don't need to announce about the shepherd. I understand according to the opinion says that you don't need to announce that a shepherd is posel edus. Hanu the Amar of Yehuda Amar Rav Stam Roya posel. That's why Yehuda Amar Rav says that by default a roya is posel edus. Therefore, if you know that somebody is a shepherd, memele, you can assume that he's posel edus. Now the Mandamar Boya Achroz, according to Mandamar, says that that a shepherd requires announcing that you have to say so and so the shepherd is posel edus. My Stam Roya posel. What does it mean that by default a roya is posel edus? Clearly, it doesn't seem like it's by default, because we're saying you have to announce about him, and otherwise he's kosher edus if you don't announce about him. What it means that by default is that by default you can simply make an announcement that so and so the shepherd is posel edus, but you would still have to make that announcement according to that opinion. There was a gift that two thieves had signed on the gift. So for Rav Papa Bar Shmuel Achshura, now Rav Papa Bar Shmuel thought to say that the document is valid, because they hadn't announced about these particular thieves. But Rav says to him, look, maybe you need to have an announcement by a gazlan derabbanon. I don't know, for example, like Mesachik Bekuvya, if you say that, let's say it's an issue of asukim b'shuva shalom, or I guess even if you say asmachta lo kanir, I think that might also only be gezel derabbanon, right? So okay, so there you need to announce. But begazlan doraisa mamish a gazlan mibainu nachaza. Do you need to announce about somebody who's actually a gazlan? If he's gazlan, the get is possible, the document is possible. Simin davar ve'aryus ganev. Amar of Nachman says of Nachman ochle davar acher psul le'edus. People who accept money from non-Jews are psulin le'edus, because it means that they're willing to do, things that we wouldn't normally do, in order to get money. But however, this is only b'farese if they accept money from the non-Jews in public. But if it's in private, low, then then that's okay. Farese and Amin, also when we say in public, that's only if they could have been sustained sort of in private. So it's only a problem in public if they could have done it in private. And they are disgracing themselves in public. But if you had no other possibility, because he had to do it b'farese, so then look, it's his life. Person needs to live, and if the only way for him to live is to receive money from non-Jews, so he can do that, but he should take every effort to not do it publicly. Omar Rav Nachman says, somebody who's suspected on inappropriate relationships, kosher le'edus, he is kosher to testify. Omar Rav Sheshes, Oni Mari, Rav Sheshes says to Rav Nachman, can you answer this for me? I don't understand. A person who's choshed al arayos, we give him makis. How can we have a scenario where we're giving a person makis because he's sinning, and yet he's kosher le'edus? Rav says, Rav Nachman over admits linin edus isha shu apostle. Rav Nachman says Rav Nachman over admits that somebody who's choshed al arayos would not be believed to testify about whether a woman's married or not. However, when we say that someone who's choshed al arayos is not believed when it comes to a woman's marital status, it's only to say that she is divorced or widowed, so you would not be believed because, we have to assume that he's got his eye on her. And that's why he's saying that she is single. But to say that she's married, we can believe him because the issue is that we're concerned that he's going to sleep with her inappropriately because he's choshed al arayos. But if he's saying that she's married, he has no interest in that, so therefore we could believe him. Pshita, that's obvious. Madhutema may have thought, no, maybe Taki is saying that she's married so that he could sleep with her, because he'd rather sleep with a married woman than an unmarried woman. You could argue that stolen waters are sweeter. So maybe he's testifying falsely that she's married just so that he could then have a relationship with a married woman. So we should say no. If he's testifying that she's married, we can believe him because he prefer that she not be married so that he could be with her. So if he says that she is married, we can believe him. Pomer of Nachman says, Nachman, Ganav Nisan, Veganav Tishrei, a person who steals in Nisan during the harvest, or in Tishrei when you gather the stuff from the fields. Lo Shmei Ganav, somebody who gathers during these times is not a Ganav, Hanimili Ba'arisa V'davar Mu'at. But this is specifically by a sharecropper who worked for this produce, and a little, and only if he's taking a little bit of v'davar shting b'malachto and something that is complete. So meaning, if you have a sharecropper who mamish worked the whole field, right? The way that works, he works mamish the whole field, and he takes a percentage for himself. If in the harvest and the gathering he takes a little bit more for himself in his completed work, okay, so he's going to still be kosher le'edus. He says to himself, look, I worked really hard for this, and he's only taking a little bit extra. Okay, it's fine. He's still going to be kosher le'edus in those particular scenarios. He's not going to be considered a ganif. So Ikra Rav Zvid, now Rav Zvid's farmer, who was an employee and not a sharecropper, so Chad Gonav Kaba, one of them stole a Kaba Desari, a Kav of barley ufasle, and Rav Zvid, I guess, said he's posel le'edus. V'chad Gonav Kibur de Ahine ufasle, and one of them took like a branch of like dates or something, and also he said he's posel because it's not a sharecropper. He said the sharecropper would not be considered a ganef, but an employee, somebody who's just working the field, if he takes stuff, he would be considered a ganef. It would be posel le'edus. Hanu Kvarai, they were grave diggers to cover Nafsha B'yomtiv Rishon Shel Atzeres, who buried people on the first day of Shavuos. Shamtinu Rav Papa excommunicated them, Fasinu le'edus, made them posel le'edus. Ve'achsharinu Rav Huna B'ed Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna B'ed Rav Yeshua said, where am I? Okay, fine. Rav Huna B'ed Rav Yeshua said that they are kosher le'edus. Papa says to Rav Huna B'ed Rav Yeshua, but they are evil because they were burying people on Yom Tov. Savi mitzvah ka'avdei. Yeah, but Rav Huna B'ed Rav Yeshua says, yeah, but they thought they were doing a mitzvah. V'akam shamtinalu. Yeah, but we excommunicated them. So why would they do it even after we excommunicated them? Savi kapara ka'avdei lo nirbanim. Well, they thought that the excommunication was just as a way of kapara, meaning they thought that, look, what does Rashi say? Savi adi shamtinam mishum, where am I? Where am I? That's what I was looking for. That they figured that it was mutar l'chal yom tov in order to do the mitzvah of bearing a mace, and they thought that they were putting guys' communication as a way of atonement for what they did, but ultimately they still believed that what they did was a good thing to do. Right, so Rav Huna B'ed Rav Yeshua felt that they were kosher le'edus. Peace out.